Social studies and English language arts are a natural complement to one another. In this video, we will explore methods we can use to support students in building their social studies content knowledge while also enhancing their reading abilities. We will look at ways to engage students in the study of history using picture books and historical fiction novels. Using these texts, students will apply their developing reading skills and expand their understanding of the contexts in which historical events took place. We will also look at unique ways we can merge specific literary reading standards, such as Standard 2, which focuses on stories, fables, folktales, and myths from diverse cultures, with students' study of ancient cultures in North America. Let's begin with a short explanation of the ways in which historical fiction picture books and novels support students' understanding of historical time periods and events. Well-written historical fiction allows students to recognize that history is not simply a collection of facts and dates, and not simply the story of famous people who end up in social studies textbooks, but instead it is a complex story of people, places, and times. Students can begin to make connections between time periods long past and their own lives, and even imagine what it might have been like to live in another place, in another time. Though historical fiction is a powerful tool for elementary social studies teachers, it is important to realize that it alone is not sufficient for teaching students to think like historians. Historians don't spend all their time reading historical fiction, and for that reason, our history instruction should be far more robust as well. Historians study clues from the past that come in the form of artifacts, images, letters, diaries, interviews, and other primary sources, and we want our students to develop skills that help them to do the same kinds of thinking historians do. To learn more about working with informational texts and primary source texts, please view the other video in this series from the Georgia Department of Education focused on reading nonfiction texts in social studies. Finding great historical fiction for children is as easy as running an internet search. Searching for a phrase like picture books about American Indians will lead you to dozens of lists of books and other websites that provide recommendations for excellent children's literature. You may also be interested in looking through the annual list of notable social studies trade books for young people developed by the National Council for the Social Studies. And never underestimate the power of talking to a school media specialist or a children's librarian at a local public library. They can recommend books based on years of experience working with teachers and young readers. In this video, you will see several trade books, but the books shown here are only used as examples. Many other books are available in media centers, libraries, and online that will work just as well to accomplish the same goals. Now we will take a look at some strategies you can use with historical fiction picture books and novels that both support students' understanding of history and develop their reading skills. Let's begin by looking at the power of text sets to help students explore a time period from the perspectives of different groups of people. Consider History Standard H3C, which asks students to describe colonial life in America from the perspectives of various people. Creating a text set containing historical fiction picture books featuring characters who are farmers, artisans, women, children, indentured servants, slaves, and American Indians will allow students to imagine the lives and experiences of a diverse set of people from a long time ago. In this example, we will include historical fiction to create our text set, but a teacher could extend this activity to include informational trade books and even primary sources. Each day, groups of students would read one of the books from the text set or listen to one read aloud as necessitated by students' reading levels. As they read, students focus on a few fundamental questions, such as, what kind of work do the main characters do during the day? What do the main characters do for fun? What makes the main characters happy and unhappy? How are the main characters' lives the same and different from your own? To encourage student discussion, you may want to provide these questions to groups on discussion cards rather than having students complete a worksheet with a list of questions. Students should be expected to support their answers during their group discussions by referring explicitly to the text, a requirement that addresses third grade Literary Reading Standard 1. You may also choose to include questions that directly address other reading standards, such as, how would you describe the main characters in the story? Or, what mood do the illustrations in the book create? As students read more books from the text set, they can compare and contrast the lives of the characters from one book to another. Students could keep track of their discoveries from each book in their social studies notebooks. Longer pieces of historical fiction, such as novels, provide an excellent opportunity for students to create parallel timelines. Almost any historical fiction novel can be used for this activity, but books set up like journals or with dated chapters are particularly well matched to the task. Luckily, many historical fiction novels for children are set up in this format. To prepare for this reading experience, teachers should set up 2 blank timelines. One will be filled in over the course of study using dates found in informational books, videos, and other sources, and the other will be filled in with dates from the historical fiction book. As students learn more and read more, they continue to add to each timeline and compare the events occurring in the characters' lives to the important historical events happening in the same time period. Parallel timelines like this help to provide a context for students to better understand historical events while also engaging in a great book and applying reading skills. You may choose to read the novel as a whole group read aloud, or even read multiple books in book clubs and have groups add to separate timelines focused on their group's book. The important thing to remember about using historical fiction books in your social studies classroom is to make sure that reading doesn't simply become a series of assigned pages to read in order to complete comprehension questions. The power of historical fiction is in making deeper connections with the names, facts, and events that typically dominate the learning of history. Literary Reading Standard 2 has a clear connection to students' study of ancient cultures, specifically History Standard 1, which focuses on early American Indian cultures. This reading standard asks students to recount stories, including fables, folk tales, and myths, from diverse cultures, determine the central message, lesson, or moral, and explain how it is conveyed through key details in the text. American Indian cultures had rich oral traditions with myths and folk tales that reflected the natural environments they inhabited. Helping students to examine these stories while studying these cultures gives them another context for thinking about the impact of environments on people's lives, as well as helping them address Reading Standard 2. Accessing American Indian myths and folktales is quite easy. With a simple internet search, you will find thousands of links to picture books featuring these stories and even more to printable versions. For this activity, it is helpful to search for folktales that are from tribes throughout the different regions addressed by History Standard 1. You will want to have examples of folktales from each region, preferably stories that focus on an important natural aspect of the region. For example, folktales from Plains tribes might focus on the buffalo, while folktales from the Southwest could focus on the creation of mesas, and folktales from the Arctic could focus on sea mammals. A particularly useful website for finding folktales from a huge number of tribes is www.native-languages.org/legends. This site contains dozens of links to printable tales from over 200 different American Indian cultures. As students study the ways American Indians used their environments to find food, clothing, and shelter, reading folk tales complements the study. While you can use these tales to address Literary Reading Standard 2, they also help students to understand elements of the natural environment that tribes valued the most. Creating a chart to accompany the reading of each folk tale provides a visual organizer to help students make meaning of the importance of each story while examining similarities and differences between them. This chart could include things such as the name of the myth, folktale, or legend, the American Indian tribe that passed down this story, the region in which this tribe lived, a summary of the story, the central message, lesson, or moral, and an explanation of why this tribe would create this tale. You might also choose to undertake an author study examining the work of children's book authors who have retold American Indian myths and folk tales. Gerald McDermott, particularly his series of Trickster Tales, Terry Colleen, and Gloria Dominic are good options for this author study since each has written multiple picture books retelling the tales of different tribes. During your author study, you will address many of the same topics you would have looked into with your students while reading American Indian folk tales from different tribes. But as an extension, the author study allows you to work with Literary Reading Standard 9, which asks students to compare and contrast the themes, settings, and plots of stories written by the same author. As you can see, fiction, and more specifically historical fiction, offers students unique access to historical content through the telling of stories. Students who enhance their understanding of history with the use of picture books, novels, myths, and legends develop a more complete understanding of the people who lived in times long ago and the events they experienced. While literary reading can play a significant role in learning about history, the importance of informational reading cannot be forgotten. We hope you will also watch the video in this series from the Georgia Department of Education about reading nonfiction texts in social studies. Here are some additional useful websites you may want to explore when considering using fiction in your study of history.